Seems like this whole philosophy kind of relies on customer feedback.
Yeah.
What's the best way to acquire or validate or quantify that?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's actually a really good article, and I'll make sure I get the link. I'll tweet it or something like that after the thing's over with, or give it to Mark. He can share it with you guys. By a guy named Christian Rohr, who's in the Bay Area, and he has a really nice grid that shows all the different techniques for gathering customer feedback, from qualitative to quantitative, and kind of when to use it. He has it all in one chart, which is kind of cool. It's got a good article. It's about 3 years old now, but it's a really good article. And it sort of gives you the landscape of those. But in roughness, you really basically have qualitative and you have quantitative. Qualitative being, it's not statistically significant data, but you're getting direct feedback from customers either through like observation, through, maybe you've done a lot of questions and you've built personas from them. You sort of have a personality kind of profile, we call personas. You do design research, which that's where the ethnography comes in, where you go out and actually research what customers want, felt needs. Usability studies, where you actually take some product in front of them. You can also do solution concept testing, where you kind of sketch out ideas and see if it resonates with consumers. Those are all sort of that qualitative, aspect. And then the quantitative, the data, that's where you're getting actual feedback based on clicks or engagement or surveys fall a little bit more in the qualitative. I mean, they're a little bit qualitative, quantitative. They're a little between, because you get statistical significance on it if you get enough surveys out there, but it's what people say about themselves. So while the data is quantitative, the input is kind of qualitative, right? And you can learn from that if they're constructed correctly, right? There's a lot of ways to do it. I'd say the kind of the guerrilla tactics are, depends on who your customers are. If they're internal customers, whatever, just get with them. If they're external or whatever, you're going to have to do some sort of guerrilla kind of testing. If you don't have a usability lab or don't have the budget, you can do really simple. Just put on Craigslist or whatever else. You do usability. When I use like Google spreadsheet to people to fill their information in, because you can create a form for it. Right? They just fill their thing in. It goes in your Google spreadsheet. You got the phone number to call them. They give a little profile information about themselves. You pick who you want. You be in your own selector. You have some place like a Starbucks public space so they feel comfortable. You sit there, you've got Wi-Fi there, you buy lots of coffee with the Starbucks folks throughout the day. They're happy with it, and then or you sit out in the patio area and you do it. And you can a real good person for that sort of thing is Christine Perfetti in Boston. She has video tutorials on how to do usability studies. They're excellent. Christine Perfetti is just an awesome person. And I can get you these, if you remind me, Mark, I'll get these kind of things in the email or whatever. In fact, when I went to do the last time I did that sort of thing, I went and watched her videos again, because I don't do usability studies that often, right? So I forget, some people are natural at not leading the witness and asking the right kind of questions, right? If you have consumers, like you've got a site that's public, and you're getting a lot of traffic, then you can do, you can get, feedback. You can instrument for that and feedback. The key there is you need to understand what you're trying to measure. Like Netflix, we didn't even measure engagement. We were a subscription service. So it was all about acquisition, retention, and cost. Those three measures. That was what it was, everything. Cost wasn't so much usually in our mindset. Acquisition and retention. If you're on the marketing side trying to acquire customers, that channel was all about acquisition. It was all about how do I get more people to sign up as a trial and get into membership. On the member side, it was all about retention. But retention you can't measure directly, because by the time somebody's quit, they quit, and you also don't know what caused them to quit, right? And you don't ever really know that. I mean, but what you do is you say, well, what's a good proxy metric for that? So you can hypothesize that if people get value out of the service, they'll stay as a member. It's kind of a simple idea, but probably mostly true. There could be other extenuating circumstances or whatever, market pressures, et cetera, but generally that's what you think. So getting value out of the service like Netflix, would be consumption. Well, in the DVD world, before we had streaming, that was all about adding movies to your queue, because that was a predictive measure of your consumption, even though you may not actually consume that. As those of you that are Netflix members or have been, you know that your DVDs will sit there. And from my past life, I want to thank you very much for supporting me and paying my salary on all your stacked up DVDs at home. We all had 8 at a time as employees, so I always had a stack at the house. But so we only had that, you know. So if you put something in the interface, and they quit adding movies to the queue, then there was something that was, you know, there was something that's distracting. We had one example where we had this kind of like ratings game where you know, in the row of movies you could say, yeah, I rate that movie, and then it would disappear and another one would come in its place, right? And it was a kind of cool thing. We put that on the home page, and consumption, adding movies to the queue dropped, and retention dropped. We actually had more people cancel because of that. Because they're spending all their time, you think about, and we test a lot of new members, right, coming in. They spent their time rating movies and not watching anything, or not getting anything shipped to them. So they got no value out of the system, so they end up canceling, you know. It's kind of a crazy, bizarre world. But so we were too successful. We ended up moving it to another page, and it actually gave us more taste input, which better made our algorithms better, which made us show better movies, which actually increased retention slightly by putting it in another place in the site. You would never figure those things out unless you had some data to test, right? Now, I don't know what your business, you know, if it's like a website that gets on.
Subscription service.
Okay, yeah, so real similar, yeah. Yeah.
What about you know, metrics and tracking analytics?
Yeah, so you want to have enough of that, obviously, so that, you know, you can feed it into the system. And a lot of these tools that do the data analytics now, you know, the Optimizely's or Google Analytics or whatever, you can just put their tracking stuff in there, and, you know, it's pretty easy to add. You had a lot of JavaScript or instrument a certain part of it, and you get the data, you know, back. So it's pretty easy to do that. But as a front engineer, that's stuff we should be very proactive about.
Yeah.
Right. Other questions? Where's our food? Dude, it's 10 after 12, dude. Come on, I'm hungry. This reminds me of yesterday, because we were at our big eBay Leaders 2-day thing, you know, offsite, and we went long for some reason. I don't know. Everybody was showing demos and stuff, and we were supposed to break around noon. It was almost 2 o'clock. 1,500 people, hungry. I was like, let me out of here. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, related to what you're saying, a little off topic, but you seem to know a lot about Netflix.
Yeah.
There was a time when they just came out and there's all this competition. What brought them to this very prominent position?
I think it's the data. You know, like, for example, Blockbuster. Blockbuster is a total technology dinosaur. Had no idea, you know, how to do anything. I lived in Dallas, and I knew some of the people who worked at Blockbuster. And, you know, what they told me, they just didn't grok the change that was coming, streaming and all those sort of things like that. You know, so one of the big things with Netflix is success. There's actually a book called Netflixers, I think, that just came out. I've been wanting to read it. It's by somebody writing about the early history of Netflix. But the efficiency that they created that machine around DVD, around the whole way you could get DVDs out in one day, was like huge. You know, creating a very efficient machine and making it, you know, simple to find a movie and having that large selection. You know, like a really big piece of that.
Was that part of their original vision, or did they discover
So,
this?
you know, Reed's original vision was about, you know, I think he always wanted to get to somewhere you could, you know, watch it online. Hence the name, even Netflix, right? His original thing was, he'd already done Pure Software and retired, which was a C++ memory leak tool. And, you know, he got this idea about, wouldn't it be great to get DVDs by mail? So he actually mailed it to himself, and it came back and didn't break. So he realized it was possible. And that's kind of how they started. You know, they started stuffing their own, you know, envelopes, you know, and a few of them together. So it started really pretty humble, right? Yeah. But that machine around the DVD stuff was crazy because it was hard to, it was a barrier to entry. Only Blockbuster had the scale to do that. Nobody else really could invest that much, because we had, at one point we had 55 shipping centers around the country and 100 shipping points, so little, smaller things. So most people lived geographically where you could get something in one day, come out of the center. And then we hired people out of the Postal Service, like the head of security for the head of the Postal Service security, the Postmaster General security guy, whatever his name was. And he worked on sting operations at the Postal Service to find people stealing Netflix, DVDs, and we got our theft rate down from 2 or 3% down to 0.25% or something like that. Breakage, we would do studies on like the polymer base on the DVDs, what actual substrate material to use that was going to break less or more. We'd hire people out of the replicator industry, and they had friends in the replicator companies, and they would talk to them and say, what if you use a gray disc, that the one that you've seen, those that are gray, they break less frequently, they wear better, and we get more turns on it, which means we can make more money on that DVD over time, right? So they watched all that data, aggressively around the DVD shipping of the 100,000 titles. If you went to the big Sunnyvale hub when it was in operation, they've kind of distributed it apart now. But when the big mammoth one was there, 85% of the titles never got reshelved back in inventory. They were just in this big, gigantic system that shuffled itself through, and it would run in a big circle, just all the DVDs flying by and being shot out into distribution belts to be sorted to be sent somewhere in the country, based on the 3-letter prefix on the thing. You can search for some videos on it on YouTube, I'm pretty sure, and see it. But for the longest, it was a while when I first got there, that was like our offside every quarter. We'd spend about a half a day just on DVDs and breakage. And then when the Blu-rays came out, they broke more on the, I think it was on the inside versus the outside. And so we had a 6-month study on why that was happening. It turned out to be there was a machine within the Postal Service. One of the sorting machines was actually tuned incorrectly, and they would pinch it at one corner of the turn, this big complicated machine. And so because we had a great relationship with the Postal Service, we got them to tweak it and change the instruction manual across all the Postal Service. So everybody tweaked it differently, and breakage rates dropped, and So that was the kind of stuff. Then you switch to a streaming company, it's totally different. But they applied the same thing, right? So we negotiated really heavily with the CDNs, the content delivery networks, and had the 3 of them playing against each other, played hardball, got really cheap rates, negotiated well with the studios because we had hired people out of the studios, and we had a great content team down in LA that were smoothed and knew all the studio folks, and and they understood their ethos of that whole system because they all came out of the studio business, and they were in Beverly Hills, and we actually had film producers. Our product manager was actually a film producer, the whole thing. So we're real smart about that. And then there, we got deals where all the streaming stuff was fixed cost. There's no per view. So you just paid for a title and you could do as much as possible, which incidentally is why you no longer see something like the Top 100 that got removed from the site, because when it showed up, Hollywood folks would call us, the studios call us, say, well, ours is the top, we should get paid more. So that's why it went off. It wasn't because of consumers, it's because we started giving the data to them to try to negotiate on the content. But they were ruthless about data, and data also, from the customers. I've talked mostly about the customer stuff, but that's all the data just about the business, Reed is Reed's a really smart guy. He's, engineer at heart. He was he and Neil, who's the head of product there, Neil Hunt, and Stan Lanning, who's the guy who came up with the star rating, the first Ajax kind of thing. It was actually done with the 204 no content approach, but not even with Ajax, where you just get a no content, no refresh. Okay. All right. So those 3 guys created Purify, which was the C++ memory leak detection system. Yeah. So.